Caravaggio's The Conversion of St. Paul and the Crucifixion of St. Peter, painted around 1601 for the Cerasi Chapel in Rome, stand as one of the most intellectually unified and theologically profound pairings in Baroque art. Installed opposite one another, these two works are not simply independent depictions of biblical events, but form a deliberate visual and spiritual dialogue. Together, they articulate a complete theology of faith, its sudden, internal beginning and its ultimate, external fulfillment. Through his radical use of light and darkness, specifically chiaroscuro and its intensified form, tenebrism, Caravaggio constructs a visual language in which divine grace is not directly seen but is unmistakably experienced. At the level of technique, Caravaggio's mastery of light is central to both paintings. Chiaroscuro, the modeling of forms through contrast between illumination and shadow, allows the figures to emerge with striking three-dimensionality. However, Caravaggio pushes this further into tenebrism, where darkness dominates the composition and light appears as a sharp, almost violent intrusion. In both works, the background recedes into near-total blackness, eliminating any sense of setting and focusing the viewer entirely on the illuminated bodies. The light source is never depicted, and this absence is crucial. It transforms light from a natural phenomenon into a theological sign. In the Conversion of St. Paul, light functions as an interruptive force. It breaks into Saul's world, blinds him physically, and initiates his spiritual awakening. In the Crucifixion of St. Peter, light no longer interrupts but confirms. It reveals Peter's body at the moment of suffering, affirming the truth of his faith. Thus, light operates across the two paintings as a continuum, first as grace received, then Caravaggio's method of production reinforces this immediacy and theological clarity. Rejecting idealized preparatory designs, he painted directly onto the canvas, often using live models drawn from ordinary life. His figures are not classical or perfected. They are aged, strained, and grounded in physical reality. The executioners in Peter's crucifixion resemble laborers rather than symbolic villains, and Saul appears as a vulnerable, ordinary man rather than a heroic figure. This commitment to realism is not merely stylistic, but theological. By presenting sacred events through common bodies and tangible physical effort, Caravaggio insists that divine transformation occurs within the realm of lived human experience. The theological structure of the two paintings becomes clear when they are considered together. The Conversion of St. Paul represents the beginning of faith. Saul lies on the ground, his body open and passive, overwhelmed by a divine force that is invisible to both him and the viewer. The absence of Christ emphasizes that the encounter is internal. It takes place within the soul rather than in the external world. In contrast, the Crucifixion of St. Peter represents the culmination of faith. Peter's body is actively engaged in suffering, lifted upward in a moment of public witness. What began invisibly in Paul is made visible in Peter. The two works thus establish a theological progression. Grace enters the individual silently, transforms the inner self, and ultimately manifests outwardly through action and sacrifice. This progression is reinforced by the physical arrangement of the paintings within the Cerasi Chapel. Positioned on opposing walls, they create a spatial experience for the viewer, who must turn from one to the other. This act of turning is not incidental. It mirrors the concept of conversion itself, a reorientation of the self. The viewer stands between the beginning and the end of faith, between transformation and testimony. The altar, situated between the two works, further anchors this relationship, suggesting that both conversion and martyrdom are responses to Christ's central sacrifice. Metaphorically, Caravaggio deepens the connection through compositional parallels. Paul is depicted falling, his body collapsed under the force of divine light, while Peter is shown being raised, his body inverted and elevated on the cross. These opposing movements, falling and lifting, form a visual symmetry that reflects a shared spiritual condition. Both saints are removed from control and subjected to a higher power. Their instability is not accidental but symbolic. It represents the overturning of ordinary reality and the reordering of life according to divine will. In both cases, physical disorientation corresponds to spiritual transformation. A further unifying element is the presence of indifferent bystanders. In Paul's scene, the groom calmly manages the horse, seemingly unaware of the miraculous event. In Peter's crucifixion, the executioners focus on the mechanical task of raising the cross, devoid of visible malice or reverence. This indifference underscores a key theological idea. Divine action is not always recognized by the world. Grace operates quietly, often unnoticed, within ordinary circumstances. The sacred does not disrupt reality in a theatrical sense. It exists within it, accessible only through inner perception. Central to both works is the theme of humility. Caravaggio rejects the traditional, heroic portrayal of saints, and instead presents them in moments of vulnerability. Paul lies helpless on the ground, while Peter, aged and physically strained, is crucified upside down at his own request. This inversion is particularly significant. By choosing a position opposite to that of Christ, Peter expresses his unworthiness and deep reverence. Caravaggio emphasizes this humility not through symbolic ornament, but through the physical reality of the body. The saint's weakness becomes the site of their spiritual strength. Ultimately, the pairing of these two paintings constitutes a complete theological vision. Caravaggio does not merely illustrate biblical events. He constructs a system in which light, body, and space work together to express the nature of faith. Light enters as grace, transforms the individual internally, and is later revealed through outward action. Darkness represents not evil alone, but the ordinary world that remains unchanged, even as individuals are transformed within it. The viewer, positioned between these two moments, is invited to reflect on their own place within this process. In this way, Caravaggio's The Conversion of St. Paul and The Crucifixion of St. Peter transcend their immediate narratives. They become a unified meditation on the dynamics of belief, how it begins, how it develops, and how it is ultimately proven. Through his revolutionary use of teneburism and chiaroscuro, his commitment to realism, and his profound theological insight, Caravaggio creates not just paintings, but an immersive and enduring exploration of the human encounter with the divine.